Hello, welcome to Common Good Cocktail Guide, Gin Edition. Gin is one of my favorite spirits. I feel like it ranges from everywhere from a garden to a forest, and someone who just likes delicious things can like the quality of gin, the characteristics of gin, just because it's so crazy different. I have something to talk about with you at home who might be thinking to yourself, I don't even want to listen to this thing about gin. It makes me want to throw up because I used to drink gin all the time in college and I threw up all the time in college. This is a word for you. And to get to where we need to go in this discussion, we do need to jump into the nerd taxi together. So let's dive in. Gin began, most people trace its origin back to Holland in the 1600s. Some historians trace some like juniper flavored spirits all the way back to like the early 1st century AD, like around like 70 AD or so. For our purposes, let's start with the Holland gin, and that was called Genever. And Genever is the grandfather of gin because it was made from a malt spirit, something like an unaged scotch, flavored with juniper berries. And right away it brings up, I think, a misconception about gin that we should address. So some people will say that they love vodka and they love flavored vodka, but they don't love gin because gin is just flavored vodka and it's flavored with juniper berries. Yes, that's true for bad gin. No, that's not true for most good gins out there today. Post-World War II America, where distilleries were converting from war efforts to commercial distillations. They were trying to do things as economical as possible, and sometimes economical means to some people unethical. And what I mean by that is in the world of distillation, what you're trying to do is isolate the ethanol molecule. And as you're trying to isolate it, you're just essentially raising the temperature to where ethanol evaporates, but really nothing else does. And we drink that ethanol, and that's just the alcohol that we drink that's not as poisonous as some of the things that surround the ethanol molecule, like ethyl acetate and methyl alcohol. One of those words is the same chemical that's in nail polish remover. Good distillers, or distillers that want to put out a good product at least, they'll cut the heads, that's what that's called, to remove that, or they'll siphon off the ethyl acetate and they'll sell it to nail polish remover companies. But if you want to make a bigger profit, have a bigger yield in your distillation, you're just going to bottle all that up and sell it as your like cheap vodka. People did actually start getting wise to this nail polish remover inside of vodka scenario, and so distillers started to cheat even more. Instead of removing that chemical, they would just cover it up, try to flavor it more with juniper. If you've had that bad gin experience where you feel poisoned after drinking it, that's probably why. You're drinking nail polish remover as well as your gin. Not really how it's done today. Gin, most of the time it's produced today, is actually redistilled with juniper berries and other botanicals. It was actually that style of making gin that was the next style to evolve out of Genever. It's called Old Tom style gin. Old Tom style gin came around in England after the coffee or column still was invented in Ireland. It allowed us to make neutral grain spirits. And these clean spirits were then redistilled or just infused with juniper berries. The London Dry and the Plymouth style gins came after that. The sugar was reduced or taken out completely, so it became dry, and the juniper was accented a little bit more. This is the style of gin that if you're sitting at home being like, I don't like it because it smells like a forest, this is probably the style of gin that you've tried and want to avoid now. After London Dry style gins, like new international styles, American styles were invented, and those can range and taste like anything. So we'll get into those a little bit later, but be assured that at Common Good, we don't carry any of those gins. All of our gins are fantastic. They're redistilled. They have proper cuts in them. And if you come and take the risk at trying one of our gins, you might just actually learn that you enjoy it and you won't feel so terrible afterwards. Let's go over some specific styles of gin here that we have, how we use them, and why you might love them. Okay, so let's start. This here is Hayman's Old Tom Gin. It represents that category that I touched on. One of the parents of the gin as we know it, our London Dry styles. It's a little bit sweeter than London Dry, but it's used in so many classic cocktails. We use it in our house martini or Tom Collins. If you're looking for a classic Old Tom Gin, this is the one to get. Sipsmith is one of our London dries that we carry. I love it because it is sort of a small, crafted London dry style from London, has all the classic London dry botanicals in it, and kind of gives way to this another Hayman's bottling. This is Navy strength gin. This comes from the Imperial British Navy, where they would ration out gin to their sailors. Sometimes they'd mix it with like a lime cordial, but they wanted to not have their drunken sailors ruin their war efforts or war readiness. So they proofed up gin all the way to the alcohol percentage at which, when spilled on gunpowder, the gunpowder still ignites. In the US, we call that 114 proof. In the UK, it's 100 proof or Navy strength. Leopold Brothers. This is one of my favorite gins. It's an American style gin, which means just the botanicals are slightly different. We might emphasize citrus a little bit more. A little bit looser of a category, not quite as juniper forward. But what's wonderful about Leopold Brothers Distillery north of Denver, they're one of the craft distilleries that's doing things really well. They actually cultivated for years flora around their distillery so that they could open up their windows during their fermentation process and get some of those beautiful like microorganisms to make that fermentation process natural and beautiful. And they do things with such a low and slow method that there's all these wonderful organic acids that carry through from their fermentation to the distillation, so you get beautiful high notes on the palate when you taste that. Moving on, we have 4 new gins we're gonna talk about. First one is Maplewood. This is their spruce gin. This is a local to Chicago gin that does a lot of amazing things. First, it's going to take Colorado spruce tips and blend it with a lot of like wonderful citrus and juniper berries. But they also use a really cool combination of neutral spirits and malted spirits. So it's sort of a throwback to the Geneva style, but also with some of that like more modern neutral spirit elements to it. If you're someone who does hate the idea of gins that taste like a forest, avoid this one because you're not gonna love it. But everyone else, this is a wonderful gin to try. Speaking of forest notes though, these 2 gins come out of San Francisco. This one's called Terroir, this one's called Botanivore. And I think they're a wonderful contrast to show anyone who's out there who's like, I've had gin that tastes like a forest, but not one that tastes like a garden. This really does both beautifully with their different expressions. This tastes like 12 different botanicals that are all grown in and around the San Francisco region. So it really actually tastes like the terroir of the area. Everywhere from California bay laurel to fennel to coastal sage. It's a really beautiful spirit. This one is more floral, delicate flavors, more like a garden. This one, Malfi, this is from the southern coast of Italy, which is famous for its beautiful citrus that it grows there, and this gin captures those citrus notes very well. A great example of a new international style of gin. All right, a new round of gins. So we're gonna touch on 3 Irish gins and a German gin. These are some of my favorite gins out there right now. I feel like Ireland is doing some really crazy things in distillation. This one, Gunpowder Gin, not only has gunpowder tea, but a lot of botanicals that you'll normally find in Asia. These 2 gins are from the same distillery, even though they're different brands. This one's sourced, this one is from the West Cork distillery. West Cork is the 3rd largest distillery in Ireland right now, even though distilleries are just exploding all over the place. Not actually exploding, but growing a lot. A lot of craft distilleries coming up there, but this one, Garnish Island and Glendalough, these are both wild forage gins. You might walk around a mountain and find fresh botanicals you want to use, throw them in the still. Normally they're dried. They really produce some interesting notes. This one is also non-chill filtered, so it has more of a rich, viscous feel to it, as well as those like delicate floral notes. This one is going to be also non-chill filtered, but with some different botanicals. So 2 wonderful different expressions of what floral wild forage gins can taste like. Monkey 47. This is from the Black Forest of Germany, using 47 different ingredients. Complex, beautiful. I think this one is also distilled from molasses, which is a crazy element to it. But I think these gins can really display the range of what a new international style can do. All right, you ready to get crazy with me? Because these are 4 crazy gins. This one is made from agave, and it's designed by students from a university in Mexico. Being distilled from agave, it's on its way to being a tequila, but instead of ending up as a tequila, it's redistilled with gin botanicals. So it's a gin tequila. It's really amazing. This one is even crazier. This is made in the Philippines, and believe it or not, more gin is consumed in the Philippines than it is in the UK right now. But the really crazy thing about this is that it is made from sugarcane, so it almost becomes like a rum agricole that's then redistilled with gin botanicals. So super funky. These two are seasonal releases from colleagues and friends of mine in Logan Square. They started the distillery Leatherby, which is like Let There Be gin in this case. And they do not only a standard gin, but seasonal releases, autumnal and vernal, or one for the fall, winter, one from the spring, summer. These are two beautiful ones that we carry. They're both from 2019. Their vernal has shishito peppers in it, and their autumnal has like toasted rice and 3 different types of seaweed in it. So really beautiful, really crazy, also non-chill filtered, full-bodied expressions of gin. Okay, we're gonna finish with 2 barrel finished gins. So gins, as we've seen so far, they're just mostly clear spirits that might have a little bit of coloring from some of the natural botanicals that they use in the distillation process. These 2 gins are 2 of the barrel-aged gins or barrel-finished gins that we've selected at Common Good for very particular reasons. Normally I like my gin to taste like gin and my whiskey to taste like whiskey, and I don't like gin-ski or whiskey flavored gins, but I do love when distilleries choose oak that's going to like bring out different elements of the gin that they've made. So Chicago Distilling, located right in the heart of Logan Square on Milwaukee Avenue, on my old stomping grounds. These guys make a gin that's already a little bit crazy. They use Szechuan peppercorns and green cardamom in it. It's one of those gins that you don't necessarily just plug it into a gin recipe in a cocktail. You design a cocktail based around this gin because it's that unique in its flavor. I love this barrel-aged expression. Very affordable, I think very beautiful, very unique. The Liberator coming out of Detroit. This one I love because even though it says there's a delicate cinnamon finish, it is the biggest cinnamon bomb of a gin that I've had. I mean, it's not just like a fireball. Compared to that, it is delicate, but I love the oak notes in here that don't just make it like a bourbon, but that complement the cinnamon that's going to be found in it. Okay, so there you have it. We've now touched on most of the gins that we carry here at Common Good. Hopefully you've seen a gin or a style of gin that you've never heard of or experienced before, and if that's true for you, please come on into the bar, ask a server, ask a bartender to pour a flight of some of these gins that looks particularly interesting to you. Try it by itself, try it in your favorite cocktail, whatever you want to do. That's the kind of stuff that we love around here. So I hope that this did provide somewhat of an education and hopefully a new insight and way to enjoy a classic category of spirits. Cheers.